Hello, everybody. We're watching our attendee list climb. It's taking Zoom a minute to get everybody aboard, so please be patient. And we're already at 50 participants, so it's climbing very quickly here. Also, I can mention to those who are on right now that Minister Joly is a tad late. Nothing too drastic, but will probably be a minute or two before starting. So please sit tight, and as soon as she's available, we'll get started. Thank you. Again, for those who've just joined us, we're waiting for Minister Joly to come in. She's just a tad late, so um, asking for your patience here. Oh, here we go. Hello.
Hello, Vern. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. I think we're live right now, so if you like, we'll just get started, shall we?
Of course.
Great. Good evening, everybody. I'm Vern Milo, a director of the Welland Pelham Chamber of Commerce, and on behalf of the South Niagara Chambers of Commerce, we're pleased to be able to present this session to you along with our colleagues from Grimsby, Lincoln, West Lincoln, Niagara-on-the-Lake, and Greater Niagara Chambers of Commerce, as well as the Niagara Centre Board of Trade of Thorold. We also want to thank our sponsors, B4 Networks and Growth Associates, for their time and contribution to make this possible. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are now sitting at 70 participants, so we've got a nice count, and I hope everybody's had a chance to get a bite to eat, and we'll have a very informative hour coming up. Our format will begin with an update from Minister Joly, followed by a question and answer period. As an introduction to the Honorable Mélanie Joly, was first elected as a member of Parliament to represent Hunsik-Cartierville in the House of Commons in 2015. As Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages, her mandate includes promoting regional economic development and protecting our two official languages. In her previous ministerial roles, Minister Joly had worked to promote Canadian culture and to grow and increase the visibility of Canada's tourism sector, something that's certainly very important to us in Niagara. She's also worked to safeguard Canada's two official languages while promoting the use of French in Canada and around the world, including within the digital sphere. Prior to entering federal politics, Minister Joly founded the Vrai Changement pour Montréal, a party, and ran for Mayor of Montreal in 2013 under its banner. Minister Joly holds an honors Bachelor of Law from Université de Montréal and a Magister Juris in European and Comparative Law from University of Oxford. She is the author of Changing the Rules of the Game, in which she shares her vision for public policy and civic engagement. She was named Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. So thank you very much, Minister Joly, for joining us this evening. It's very much appreciated, and we're certainly looking forward to hearing your words and your insight into the present situation. The questions are actually in two categories, just for those that are listening. One is called the mitigation phase, which is where we're in now, and that's followed by 4 questions dealing with recovery. So we'll go along that route. The first question is, Minister Joly, we
Vern,
appreciate, yes? Oops.
first, thank you for the introduction.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
It's okay. Thank you for the introduction. Great French. Très bon français.
Merci, merci.
I think also I have colleagues like you mentioned on the Zoom. I have Vance Badaway and Chris Biddle that I know that are on this. So thank you folks for being there. And I'm a big fan of Niagara. I even launched, I've been 2 times in the past year, 3 times actually. And so, and I had the chance to talk to the mayor a bit earlier today as well. And I'm very much aware that the tourism sector is key to the success of the region and deeply impacted. So I know you'll have questions about that, and it will be a pleasure for me to answer them. Do you think it's worth it for me to go through all the different types of measures? It would take me 5 minutes, the economic measures, or it's not worth it at this point? Your members know about them, and let's go directly into questions.
Actually, it's my mistake. We were anticipating you having an introduction of that manner, and I went right into the questions and I missed that. So it's my mistake as moderator. Long day for me. So my apologies. But yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay, good, perfect. So 3 priorities for government. Well, first and foremost, thank you for all being here. It's a pleasure and taking the time. I know this is usually the 5 à 7, you know, time of the day. So if you want to enjoy while listening to us, please go ahead. 3 priorities for government. First and foremost, obviously, is protecting people's health and lives, and making sure that people can follow the strict regulations, the strict advice of our public health authorities. In order for doing that, people need to know that they'll be able to pay their rent, pay their mortgages, and put food on the table. So as there was a lot of anxiety, and there's still a lot of anxiety, we came up with the new CRB, CERB, the $2,000 amount per month. And that was to deal with the financial pressures of Canadians and have a people first approach. And this was also to make sure that we would provide a new social safety net. At this point, we didn't have time to create new programs. We just went ahead, decided to expand massively the definition of EI, and that's how we went ahead. It includes also more funding through GST payments. Also, some of you may have received checks in the mail, and also increase to the Canada Child Benefit of $300 per child. And then eventually we moved to our 3rd priority, which is the economic response and economic package. At the beginning, when we were making all these Zooms and having conversations internally, our reading of the crisis was, okay, there will be a cash crunch for 1 month, maybe 2. This is an issue of liquidity. We need to work with the banking sector, with the BDC, EDC, and that's the way we will be dealing with cash flows of businesses. And so we saw that as a movement in demand. So there would be maybe no demand for 1 or 2 months, and then demand would be back. And we just needed to help businesses to deal with fixed costs. But more we were having these conversations, and definitely I had lots of conversations with Karen Beattie, the president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. More we were hearing that, the reality on the ground, more we moved and decided to go into much more a subsidy approach, where we were really going to help more businesses to deal with their burn rate, so their fixed costs. And that's why we came up with a wage subsidy. It used to be 10%, now it's 75%. Good news is first checks will be sent in 3 days, or bank transfers on May 7th, it will be started. If businesses have not yet registered and folks are watching us, please go ahead on the CRA website. It is the way to go ahead. So that's the first thing. Second thing is we decided to create a new program, which was the CEBA account, the $40,000 loan for SMEs, for small businesses. And that included a $10,000 subsidy, because if you reimburse within 2 years, you'll be able to keep $10,000. And then we went ahead also with rent relief. Meanwhile, postponing in time the payments of GST and corporate taxes and custom duties. So the rent relief program will be coming up very quickly, mid-May. And finally, because we were seeing businesses falling through the cracks, sometimes they didn't have access to the $40,000 loan, sometimes the wage subsidy didn't apply to them. We decided to expand out again the safety nets and tighten it. And we decided to go ahead and support more our regional development agencies, which in Niagara would be FedDev. And that's the agency I'm in charge of. And so FedDev is an economic development agency that is there to support businesses that are falling through the cracks. And so definitely, I'll be coming out with the details of the new programs very shortly. And we will be sending the details also to you, Vern, to make sure you can provide that to your members, because that will be helpful. So that's my take on all the different things. There are also money for the arts and cultural and sports sector, and the Indigenous businesses. Please feel free to ask questions if you have any regarding also these much more targeted helps. So thanks.
Great, that's awesome. Yeah, and a great rendition. It's the nicest summary I've heard yet. Thank you.
I can give you the bullet points if you want.
That's ideal. Shall we go into the questions?
Please go ahead.
Great. Minister Joly, we appreciate you joining us virtually and answering questions put forward by our membership here at the Chamber. Obviously, we're in unprecedented times, and the government has announced a number of measures to respond to the COVID crisis. Things are moving very quickly. Can you give us a broad overview of what government has announced to date? I think we've done that. Is there anything else in the overview that you wanted to talk about regarding supporting businesses, or should we move on to the next question?
Next question. I think Great. At the end of the day, I would like to have a dialogue, a conversation.
Perfect.
Because what I would be helpful for me, Vern, is if there aren't any gaps that we can identify. And if there's still, no gaps, well, perfect. We can just provide the information. So
that's great. Good. Question number 2 is, can you tell us more about the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, which will be administered through Canada's Regional Development Agencies, RDAs, including FedDev Ontario, which you've already mentioned, and Community Futures organizations. I know this falls under your mandate. Can you provide us with more information on which businesses will be eligible for support?
Good. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, we know that some businesses are falling through the cracks. The issue of sole proprietorship being one of them. And so the idea is to make sure, and I'll be, like I said, releasing the details very soon, but the idea is to make sure that if you don't have access to wage subsidy or you don't have access to CEBA account, you have another tool in your toolbox, and you can go see FedDev. Now, I know that FedDev is not as well known as a regional development agency that maybe, I don't know if there are Atlanticers on this call, but ACOA is very well known as Atlantic Canada. Why? Because FedDev is only dates to the economic crisis of 2008 and has been really helping on the ground businesses since then. So the community futures organizations are sometimes a bit more known. Both FedDev and the community futures organizations will have a substantial increase in their budget. So if you know your community futures organizations, please go ahead and already have these conversations, because the idea is to make sure that we can send money and help businesses as soon as possible. It will be loans, so it will be to provide liquidity at interest-free loans. So that's the idea, and to cover the issue of wage subsidy and CEBA. The only place where there will be much more subsidies coming will be for non-for-profit organizations, including, for example, the Chamber of Commerce. or the, an economic development agency that are trying to really help businesses and organize them. So that's the idea. And it's the first time that FedDev will be playing a role in economic stability. Usually it would be the BDC and banks, but since we know that there's still cracks in the system, I think this is the first time we're really showing FedDev and the community producers organization how much we trust them and we value their work, because usually certainly FedDev is much more in times of economic stimulus to support and drive demand, which is not where we're at yet. So that's why I think FedDev is just key right now.
Not bad. And we have a community futures office in Niagara, so that's nice. It's centrally located and a very active organization. So be good to see that happen.
They're doing great work, and if they're on this on this Zoom, thank you. And I know that definitely Vance and Chris have been strong advocates in favor of the community futures organization.
Yeah, and ours works very hard. I know that for a fact. So nice to see.
Good.
Next question. Is the hospitality and tourism sectors have been hit hard with COVID. What can be done further to support the small and medium-sized businesses in restaurants, hotels, and tourism sectors?
So I'm very much aware that the hospitality and tourism sector has been hard hit. I'm the minister also in charge of tourism, and I've been having conversations with my counterparts at the provincial and territorial level. I've been in close contact with Lisa McLeod every week. We have a weekly phone call, and we talk about what's going on. And I hear tourism operators being extremely preoccupied, and I know that there's a lot of anxiety, and it is normal. Just to give you an example, I was on a phone call with the G20 ministers of tourism last week. And so at the international level, tourism is down right now by 45%. We expect that it will be down by the end of the summer by 70%. So we know that the sector is hard hit. And it's not only in Canada, it is in the US, it is in Italy, it is in the Middle East, it's everywhere. So we know we have to engage internationally about this. What we agreed, all the ministers of the G20 together, is that we will be going ahead by supporting first and foremost local tourism. And then we'll go into regional tourism. And then we'll go into national tourism and then international. So we all know that because of the fact there's no vaccine, we have to find a way to have the right balance between public health and tourism and economic development. And so, it would be really difficult, I would say very damaging, if we would go ahead and do a lot of really proactive marketing approaches, which are very different from what other countries would be doing, and not being able to deal with the health impacts. And so based on that, I'm very much aware that we need to be there for the tourism sector. I know that this is a challenge, one of the biggest that the sector has gone through in years. And we were so proud of our numbers. It was going so well in 2019. It was like our best ever year. And even internationally, 1 out of 4 jobs in 2019 were created in the tourism sector.
Wow. So
that's why we know that what we're trying to do right now is look at the existing measures, see how we can tweak them, the wage subsidy, the CBA account. If people are falling through the cracks in the tourism sector, go see FedDev. And I think we need to continue the conversation as well.
Cool. Go see FedDev. It's good. I like the slogan. Will the government consider extending financial assistance programs in the event that restrictions have to be extended as well?
The question is yes. The idea was to make sure that we would be there during the pandemic, during the time that there was a lockdown and that things were not going well and the economy was pretty much frozen. So if we need to be in lockdown longer because of the fact that we're not flattening the curve, we will do that. But I think we're looking at what the Ford government is doing right now as they're reopening the economy, and the CRB, the CERB, the $2,000 per month is finalizing in June. The wage subsidy was for March, April, and May, and so we'll see. We will adapt. That's the idea, because we know, Vern, and I know I don't know the questions. You didn't send me the questions yet, but I guess you'll be asking me a question about recovery. My point is, everything we're doing right now to help our businesses survive is key to the economy and the recovery. The economy was doing well before. It is because of the pandemic that we were frozen and it stopped. So what we need to do is basically provide the right liquidity, be there for them, and that will help us in terms of recovery.
Nice. It segues into the recovery phase. So the next question I have relates to that. Would the government consider an interdisciplinary economic recovery task force with representation from business, industry, finance, and other key stakeholders?
Yes.
You did that fairly well with the Perrin Beatty and the Canadian Chamber and so forth. I read some articles on that's really what happened initially too, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it. I think by working with the Chamber of Commerce, by working with the unions, by working with people all around the country, from the manufacturing side, the tourism side, that's how we were able to get the information and make the right policy decisions. We're looking at what other countries are doing, but what we know now is that we're the country that gives the most to people and businesses of all the G7. We know that. But we know that we were in a better fiscal position than all the other G7 countries. And we know that what we're doing now will help us to deal with bouncing back. Now, the only caveat to this is that we need to flatten the curve. And we need to make sure that there's no surges in the spread of the virus. And that's why everything we'll be doing is based on public health advice. Because what can be most damaging to the economy is actually not following science. And I think that of all our economic measures, that's the most important one.
Makes sense. Without having to have some kind of repercussion of it all.
Of course, that's it.
Next question is, what is your strategy for the tourism industry post-COVID? Can you share your thinking on how the tourism can be revived and what the government will do to support its recovery? You did mention the fact that we'd be going in phases from local, regional, and international. Yeah. But is there anything else that perhaps could be in the works regarding giving it a life support?
Well, we will want to work with the sector to find really get to the point of view of different people. I think that we came up with the small business approach. Sorry. No, it's okay.
Bless you.
It's okay.
Gesundheit.
So a small business approach. But what we're thinking about also is, and we will be announcing soon, is a medium-sized and larger-sized business. We know we haven't gotten there, but we know we will get there. That will have an impact also on some players in the travel sector, airline sector, basically that are so key to the tourism sector.
Wow.
And I think about also some hoteliers that may not have access to the small business support, but may have access to some of the measures that we will be looking at to provide always liquidity. So that I think also that we have Destination Canada. Destination Canada, before, so I was the Minister of Tourism last year, and when I was appointed in charge of Destination Canada and in charge of the tourism sector, what we looked at was the capacity for Destination Canada not only do international marketing, but also drive much more domestic demand. And I'm happy we did that at the time. And to drive demand, not only during big summer months, we know Niagara is packed in July, but also during shoulder seasons. And Vance really is a strong advocate for the tourism sector. So we work together a lot on that and on making sure that there would be a national strategy on tourism. But what we did was to increase the possibility for Destination Canada to play a bigger role in supporting domestic tourism. So as we're looking at bouncing back and supporting more of the domestic tourism approaches done by, you know, the Niagara region, the Ontario, tourism board, and well, we can definitely partner, because usually our money would be, there's $100 million budget at Destination Canada. Usually it's really to support our Canada's tourism brand in the UK, in France, in China, and in the US. That's what we do. But we're looking at to see how we can deal with much more our new reality. So that would be my take on it.
Cool.
But we'll move in the right way.
Nice. Once COVID is behind us, how might the federal role and function in economic development change? I think you've spoken a little bit to that regarding tourism, but perhaps on a broader base, do we see any DNA changes in terms of your ministry?
Well, in my mandate letter, and I don't know if it's still, you know, I had the mandate to rethink and our regional development agencies.
Wow.
How I see things, maybe because I ran to become mayor of Montreal years ago, I like being close to the ground, understanding what's going on the field, and really being able to develop the ideas, the policy decisions, but much more seeing how it's landing and what's the impact on people's lives. And so definitely what we want to do with FedDev is that they're the government of proximity. They're the ears and eyes on the ground for the federal department. You know, there are not a lot of federal departments that have a presence as much as FedDev has and could be having. And that's definitely something we have in mind. And I think as I said at the beginning, you know, it was created in 2008 to deal with the economic crisis. I think we're still in the stabilization mode, stopping the bleeding, trying to tweak things. I think we'll be in the restarting the economy mode, and then there will be the recovery, and we'll see whether it's worth it to stimulate demand, and if that's the case, maybe in certain sector, and not others, we'll see. But FedDev will be there to play a role, and I would love, and I'm convinced Vance and Chris and all colleagues will agree with me, that they're the closest to the ground possible while they're still a federal agency. Nice.
One thing that comes to mind is, as the next question is, we perhaps are seeing a reversal of globalism to protectionism, all over the world. And if not for, N95 masks or whatever else, we're wondering whether, this interdependence is a vulnerability to our country. And I don't know whether you see a shift in that way. Obviously, Canada is not going to declare a policy at this point in time, but Watching from your viewpoint, what's happening around the world, do you see this as perhaps a trend, and how does that affect economic development?
Okay, so I would say three things about that. I think that this pandemic has given us a clear message as to the importance of having our own supply chain, particularly in terms of medical equipment. And I think in that sector, things will change radically, because we were able to create a supply chain by taking businesses in southwestern Ontario up to with businesses in New Brunswick and Quebec, and basically make sure that they would be at the core of creating masks, because they had the textile or the the ingredients, and then the workforce to basically build test kits, N95 masks, gowns, ventilators, etc. So we've not only helped retool these businesses through federal support, but also given them contracts to produce. And so I think more than ever, and in the future, these types of equipment will be made by and for Canadians. So that's for the supply chain in that sector. And I don't know if it's protectionism or not. What I know is that's definitely a question of saving lives and protecting. It's a question of public health. As for the other sectors, I think Canada's economy is based on export. And we're 36 million, sounds a lot, but can be quite small. And so we will need to defend an international rule-based order based on the fact that we have access to the US, Mexico, we can have access also to Europe and other G7 countries, and most countries as possible, because we can produce and we can export. And that's not the case. Well, we have a problem as a mid-sized power. So that will definitely be our take on this. And I think the third thing I would talk about is we're not the only countries facing this issue. The US is, Europe is, all countries are dealing with the fact that there was instability on financial markets. There is an issue with the fact that the governments were there to be the backbone of the economy for some time. And so I think there will be good conversations between the G7 and the G20 ministers of finance and prime ministers and presidents, leaders, to see what can be done to stabilize the economy following the pandemic. Because we've never seen that since the Second World War. Following the Second World War, there were really good international conversations, and I think we should bear that in mind, since the how can I say, not only the impact but the breadth of this crisis is definitely at a level that requires more international cooperation.
There's been a movement afoot in the last 4 or 5 years regarding export diversification. And do we see that then continuing as well, based on what you said?
You said what diversification?
Export diversification.
Yes, of course. I think there's definitely the importance of supporting our tech sector, supporting much more Canadian businesses, making sure that we have the strong businesses that are part of an ecosystem that really supports then a supply chain. So how to be able to keep our strategic businesses. And I think, I've seen the evolution of Niagara over the past 20 years. I was there in my early 20s, well, late teens. And you guys are just a perfect example of diversification. And from the wines industry, the agricultural sector, also developing, how can I say, the hospitality, the tourism sector. Niagara Falls is known by everybody in the world. So we need to be there to support our strategic businesses as they're facing real issues, and at the same time promote the local brands that are fundamental to the local economy and that are the gems of the country. So promoting local products and local, how can I say, purchases is definitely something that is important. I think it shows economic solidarity.
I agree. Yeah. Next question is we're down to 10 feet above ground level. We have a small tour operator that does tours for the motor coach industry. My business is over at the moment. My question has the motor coach issues been discussed yet, as buses are very much like the airline industry?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I haven't heard a question specific on that, but I know that my colleague Mark Garneau, who's the Minister of Transport, has definitely heard from the motor coach sector. And so I would love to hear what's the reality, what's going on, Vern. So if we could get more information, some members of my team are on this call, Reed, who works with me, and we would love to follow up.
Great. Another one related in a similar manner to small tourism is, can the rent subsidy program be extended to cover a portion of the mortgages for business owners who have their places of business and home in the same location?
Oh, that's the first time I hear that question.
That's a tricky one.
That's a tricky one. So the details have not been announced for the rent relief. And so they will be announced soon. It will be administered by the CMHC. So, and it will be a forgivable loan that will be provided to the landlord. Obviously, we want to get to, how can I say, we want to get to people to make sure that we can help them. But of course, we want to make sure that there's a right balance, and that not all Canadians are paying for things that could be seen as something that is, you know, not necessarily reasonable. So I think the right balance is important. But I hear that there can be issues with the fact that you may be working from home. And in that sense, sometimes there can be some issues. I don't know how your home is organized, and I don't know the details, but we'll be coming up with the details soon.
Nice. Similar question, is the rent program going to be reviewed, as it is very demanding for small landlords?
Well, we were able to get a deal with all provinces and territories within a week. And that was really something, quite frankly, Vern, this never happens. So it shows how much this issue was priority. Usually, let's be frank, the question of rent is much more provincial issue because the federal government doesn't have jurisdiction over landlord and tenants relations. This is really something that Ontario would. But we saw it as a way to make sure that we would be reducing pressure on businesses and dealing with the issue of fixed costs. So why did we come up with the CMHC and dealing with mortgages? It was the only way for us at the federal government to get to landlords. We don't have data about lessees and tenants and landlords. You know, the province would. So that's why we came up with this program, and we hope that the province also will be working on the fact that some landlords may be reluctant to go ahead and reduce rent. This is unfortunate because this really has an impact on people's livelihoods and the very survival of many of our small businesses.
Question here is question for Minister Joly. Does she anticipate any further support for the charitable sector to help offset the impact of COVID beyond the wage subsidy? Some have suggested providing enhanced tax credits for donations and/or a federal, and I just lost it. 1 second. Oh golly, where to go? 1 second, I got it coming up here. my goodness, my my chat line just jumped all over on me. Bear with me here.
Okay.
1 second.
A tax credit on what?
It was primarily for golly, they're gone. It was taken away. I didn't see where it went.
Well, I can answer what I have as of now, Vern. So we decided to go ahead and move our position about the wage subsidy to make sure that it would include only businesses, non-for-profits, that are seeing a downturn in terms of their fundraising. So if you're a charitable organization, a non-for-profit, and you have access to government funding, that's not going down. So you can't show that you've incurred the loss, but that your fundraising activities are down because you can't fundraise because there's no event possible right now, no gatherings. Well, we've made sure that for non-for-profits, we would be only looking at fundraising. What we will be doing also for some non-for-profits in the economic development sector, such as the Chamber of Commerce, there will be funding through FedDev. So if the chamber has an issue in terms of fundraising and is not able to have access to wage subsidy, we will be looking at not loans, but sometimes direct support, so subsidies for the organizations. So basically, Vern, if the chamber is facing that issue, please feel free to contact the team because we want to make sure that you guys are strong, because more than ever, chambers are key to make sure to organize the interest of your members and to help us then identify the gaps and do better policy making. And at the same time, we can work with you to provide the information to your members because we need to bring as much certainty as possible to the business sector as they're taking really important decisions.
Nice. Another question here is, bless you, can Ms. Joly talk about farmers a bit, please? Although it's not your sector, but perhaps you can provide some insight.
So the Minister of Agriculture, Marie-Claude Bibeau, has been working on different scenarios. The first one is, as you know, is increasing farm credit by, I think it was $5 billion. So to provide more liquidity to agricultural, entrepreneurs and leaders and farmers. So that's first thing. And I know she's working on different things right now, so I'll let her address the issue. But we're very much seized with the fact that we need to address the issue of food security. We need to make sure that we can help our farmers deal with the fact that there may be less people working in the fields right now because of sometimes there's less temporary foreign workers. And so we're very much aware of that, and that sometimes the season has been tough over the past year. And so that's why she's looking at different things right now.
Nice.
I don't want to scoop her, Vern.
Good. Here's a very risky question parce que mon français est très rouillé, mais nous avons une question en français.
OK, c'est bon.
Bonjour, Madame Joly. Avec les foyers de soins de longue durée qui sont sévèrement touchés par cette pandémie, est-ce que le gouvernement fédéral pense investir dans le développement de la construction des foyers afin d'améliorer la situation immédiate et future, principalement pour les foyers francophones en situation de minorité? Si oui, est-ce que vous pouvez nous diriger vers quel département qui pourrait nous aider et entamer la conversation? Merci. Shall I translate that or?
Yeah, please. I think it's worth it. It's a good question.
Okay, great. The question here, as Minister Joly says, it's a good one. We have all of these seniors' homes that have been severely affected by the pandemic, needless to say. And does the federal government have any intentions of investing in the development of constructing new homes for the aged to assist in the immediate and the future needs. And also with regards to Francophone seniors homes, where the Francophone community is in a situation of minorities. If possible, could you direct us to what might be a proper department that could help us with this conversation?
Ben merci pour la question. Ça me fait plaisir d'entendre une question en français. Merci, Vern, pour ton français, c'est très bon.
Merci.
Et puis, j'ai eu l'occasion d'aller au foyer Richelieu avec mon collègue Vance Badaway à Port Colborne il y a à peine 6 mois. Et j'ai eu l'occasion de rencontrer l'équipe, rencontrer les travailleurs de première ligne, les aînés. C'était extraordinaire, je me rappelle très bien. On avait eu l'occasion d'avoir aussi des enfants qui étaient venus sur place, qui avaient chanté, notamment Notre Place, qui est le fameux hymne franco-ontarien. Donc, je suis consciente qu'il y a un enjeu auprès de nos aînés qui sont en situation minoritaire. D'ailleurs, j'ai demandé à mon ministère de regarder comment on peut travailler ensemble pour aborder cette question-là. Quant à la question plus large de savoir est-ce qu'on va soutenir dans le fond, foyer pour personnes âgées, ben, c'est sûr que les résidences présentement nous préoccupent énormément. C'est extrêmement préoccupant et ça fait mal au cœur de voir qu'est-ce qui se passe dans certaines résidences. Alors, nous, on va vouloir travailler avec le gouvernement de l'Ontario et en gardant toujours la lentille francophone parce que c'est important de protéger nos aînés qui parlent français et qui ont tellement donné à notre société. Donc, je vous envoie beaucoup d'amour et je suis très contente d'avoir l'occasion de vous entendre dans le contexte de ce Zoom.
Merci. Would you like to provide an English version as well?
Yes. So, folks, I'm the Minister of Official Languages, so I'm used to doing translation, I guess. So the question in the context was, my answer was basically, I had the chance to go and meet people at Foyer Richelieu, which is a long-term care facility in Port Colborne with Vance, by the way. And I had the chance to meet the frontline workers and the elders, and there were also kids at the time. That was 6 months ago, so it was a really nice experience. And so I'm very preoccupied and heartbroken by what's going on in certain long-term care facilities. I'm in Montreal, in Quebec right now, and even in my own writing, I'm seeing it. It's devastating. So definitely, we will want to make sure to have conversations regarding the fact of protecting our Francophone community and particularly the elderly. So I already tasked my department to look at different scenarios. As for funding of our long-term care facilities, I think we'll have to have a good discussions around this country about what's going on in our long-term care facilities, like the Prime Minister mentioned, and also partner with Ontario to see what can be done.
Great, thank you. As a grape grower, oh golly, it jumped again. Just so I get to read it, it jumps on me. My apologies for that to happen. And I'll read another one here because it jumped to this one. As we get into the recovery, how will the federal government increase support of applied research in academic institutions so they can work with companies to help them develop new products, processes, and services?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think different things. We've invested massively in research. And right now what we need to do is stop the bleeding in the research sector because they're not, they're at risk. And we need to be there to help. Sometimes they don't always have access to the wage subsidy, so that's something we're looking at. The other thing also is we know that, and we've seen it with, what has been done at Brock University in St. Catharines, along with lots of grape growers and winemakers. The great relationship that has been going on to make sure that we can always adapt and better the processes and the quality of products. We know that research is key in our country and for different sectors, but also in the recovery. So yes, we'll be there to support the sector. I think when I answered your question a bit earlier regarding the agricultural sector, I'm very much aware that different types of agricultures being done in Niagara and the Niagara region. But I had the chance a couple of times to visit some grape growers and winemakers, and it would be great to know how things are going for them, and to see whether if you could give me that feedback, how things are evolving in the region, because I have many friends that can tell me under a case, people can tell me how things are going, but going through the chamber and knowing a bit more concretely what's going on would be helpful, because for me, they're at between the agricultural sector and the tourism sector. And so that's why I would love to have that point of view. And it's, the biggest hub in the country is definitely in your neck of the woods.
Actually, I'll continue with the question that I did start with the grape growers, because I found it again, and it's asked by somebody who certainly is representative of the industry. So I think it's worth repeating it if you don't mind. Following this question about farming, we are grape growers and a large part of the supply chain for wine. We are facing a bleak harvest as wineries are shuttered, and as you point out, foot track will be slow to return. Having the federal support for 100% Canadian grown will be critical for our future. Can the new FedDev program assist us in any way? Welcome back to Niagara.
Thank you. I know that Debbie Zimmerman has she must be on this call. I know Debbie. She's a strong advocate. So let's have the conversation. If you don't have access to the wage subsidy and CEBA account, and you're falling through the cracks, if that's the case, we know that the tourism sector is not completely, is impacted by what's going on, and that some measures need to be tweaked. And so that's why, like you said, go see FedDev. I think that's a good way to deal with it.
Another question is, what will the government do when landlords do not agree to participate in the rent relief program? Will the current program, businesses, with the current program, businesses are at the mercy of landlords?
It's so frustrating when they don't participate, because at the end of the day, businesses need to have that rent relief. And that's incumbent on landlords. And I'm frustrated. I know a lot of people can be frustrated when that's the case, because it's a choice between basically reducing by 25% maybe your revenues coming from your rent, or losing a business. And so, as I said a bit earlier, we're not in charge of that relationship between landlords and tenants or lessees. But what we can do is do moral persuasion, really, and work with the province for them to do moral persuasion and even go further if possible. I certainly raised it with my colleague Lisa McLeod, who I get along well with, and I know that many of my colleagues have been raising it, because that's the best way to make sure that our businesses survive. And by the way, 97% of real estate in Canada is mortgaged. Only 3% is not. And so that's why going through the CMHC, so through the mortgage system, is a very effective way. As for the 3%, we're looking at details how we can get to unmortgaged buildings and therefore their owners.
The art sector, as with the tourism sector, has seen a significant slowdown. Will there be similar supports made available to the art sector, both to help get through the shutdown and to assist with recovery?
So yes, we came up with a new funding, mechanism. It's $500 million for the arts and sports sector. It's through Heritage Canada. The details of it will be announced very, very soon. It will be for non-for-profits in the sector. I know the Shaw Festival is definitely something that everybody knows about and impacted by what's going on. And so I hope that the Shaw Festivals are already talking to their contact people at Heritage. So that would be my first thing on it. We are also looking at, big events. I know Stratford is not close to Niagara, it's further down, but definitely we're looking at how we can deal with the Stratford Festival, the Calgary Stampede, Toronto Pride, and these bigger events.
Nice. Interesting question here. Good morning from Australia. I'm a member of the Australian Institute of International Affairs. It is my honor to meet with the Honorable Melanie Joly in this platform. Could I please ask the Minister how Canada and Australia could take advantage of the strong alliance for economic development and dealing with global crisis? Thank you very much.
Okay, that's a good question. It will be my last answer because I have to go.
Absolutely, it is time up too. So yeah.
So we know that Australia is part of the Five Eye. We've always worked with our allies, and so there are different ways to make sure that we can support each other. And I would love to learn more about what's being done in Australia right now. So if he's willing to send us information, it would be great. And so if I can give my closing remarks, Vern.
Please.
Because I have another Zoom after this.
Another Zoom. My goodness. You have fortitude. You have fortitude.
So I just wanted to thank you for your availability and your leadership. Thanks to all the people working in the tourism sector in Niagara. I know these are very anxious times and difficult times, and I hear you. And so it would be great to continue to work together. We've always been strong allies, so let's continue to do just that and to defend our sector together. Thank you also to Vance and Chris that have been also strong advocates for the sector. I don't know if there are other MPs on this call. If that's the case, thank you for your service and your work. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is to make sure that we're confident in the future. And so let's work as you guys are crossing the bridge, trying to get on the other side of the shore. We'll be there holding your hand to make sure you don't fall and that you can get to a brighter place. So keep it up, continue your great work, and let's talk in a couple of weeks. We could organize that, Fern, again, to make sure we see how things are landing.
And I thank you very, very much for your valuable time, your wonderful insight, and certainly a pleasure. Ma plaisir, enchanté de votre connaissance. Et puis à la prochaine. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.